Richard.
I'm Debbie.
And we are
Richby's Life Adventures.
I've been through heartaches, I've been to heaven. I've done my best and my worst, learned my lessons. No matter how hard my life would treat me, I'd always get right back up, never worry. Cause I got a million reasons to keep holding on. Yeah, I got all that it takes to win and overcome what I...
Hello and welcome back to Richby's Life Adventures. Now, I hope you enjoyed our little trip away to the Isle of Man for the TT. We got to catch up with some great friends, some we haven't seen for a long time, and it's great to be in their neck of the woods and let them show around some of their attractions and restaurants and pubs and that in their area. So anyway, as you see, we finished off the trip with our battery alternator workshop light came on. Now we went across to a local shop and bought some multimeters and test lights just to check it wasn't something simple like a fuse. I didn't want to be struggling for the last few days without an alternator, and it was something simple like a fuse. We checked all the fuses, we checked all the charging of the alternator and confirmed that the alternator. I then set about looking for an alternator on the island, and it was £425 for a standard 110 amp alternator. Now I wanted to upgrade to the 180 amp, I wanted to go bigger, but as soon as you get across the 180 amp they go ridiculously priced, like £600–700. Plus they get a little bit physically bigger and they're a little bit tight under there. So we decided to hold fire and see if we could make it home without the alternator. And thankfully I put my isolator switch in. Now if you remember in a previous video when I was coming back from Whitby and the alternator belt went, I used that isolator switch to get us home, or to as near as we can, and now that's with our old solar system wasn't really up to keeping up with the system. Unfortunately it was a cloudy day and it started raining, so I had to have the lights on, had to have the wipers on. We got diverted, there's an accident on the A1, so we had to go all through different towns and cities and that, which meant indicating, braking, putting your brake lights on. The solar system wasn't up to keeping up with it, so it just crucified the leisure batteries. It brought them right down, so we had no choice but to stop and get an alternator belt. Should it have been a sunny day with this solar system on, we would have got home no trouble. However, now, right, so if you remember the isolator switch, I came from the starter battery to an isolator switch with 50mm cable. Then I went from the permanent live side of that with 10mm cable to my Victron B2B to then charge the leisure batteries when the engine's running. Now from the switch side of the isolator switch, I went from 50mm to the leisure batteries, so that when I switched that, it's a direct join to the leisure batteries. Now that's great, but the B2B doesn't like having the same voltage working against each other through the B2B. So I pulled out the little green jumper plug, which then switches off the B2B charger unit, and then that totally eradicates that. Took it out and that behaves absolutely fine. So now I've come home, I've flipped the switch back to being an open circuit, put the plug back in, and now I'm going to go about showing you how I diagnosed and confirmed that the alternator isn't charging. Let's get started. And that's the battery alternator light, Visit Workshop, so it's not charging. And the alternator is buried way down there, look. Just there. So it takes quite a bit of getting out. Got to take the air box out, got to take the cabin filter box out, which looks like it needs changing. There's a turbo pipe down there that may need to come off, and then some wires and obviously the belt. First port of call is to disconnect the battery. But first I'm going to show you how I went about testing the alternator to confirm that it is the alternator. Now when I was over there, I went over and bought I went to a motor factors and bought a cheap multimeter, and let me just show you. I've also bought a circuit tester, which it doubles up as an alternator tester, so it was 2 birds in 1 stone, and I think I paid £28 for the 2. Now what I needed to do is I needed to expose the battery, so luckily enough I had the tools with me to expose the battery, and then I checked the battery voltage across the terminal. So let's just do that now. So you have your red terminal where it says volts, ohms and milliamps, and then your black terminal where it says common, ground. Then you put your dial to 20 DC volts. Now a battery always runs in DC, not AC. AC is the squiggly line. That's for household voltage and stuff like that. So make sure you get it on, you can have it on, don't put it on the 2000 milliamps, put it on 20 or above, but if you put it on 20, your decimal point will be in the right place. So let's just check the battery voltage, if I can do this one-handed. Now, let's just go back there. And at the moment we're reading 12.76, which is good, because that means I've not got anything draining the battery, because I've got no way of charging that at the minute. So for that, after a week of being home, still being on 12.76, that's fantastic. Now when I start the engine, that should by rights jump that up to about 15 volts. Okay, as you can hear, I've now got the engine running, and it's dropped it down to about 12 volts. Now it's dropped it down because it's taking voltage to run the engine, and my warning lights just come on the dash saying it's not charging. So obviously it's going to take energy to power the electric pump in the fuel tank, it's going to take energy to power the ECUs up and things like that, so that's why that's dropped in voltage. So that should be somewhere between sort of 13 and 15 volts, ideally around 14.5, 14.6 volts that should be. So that tells me then it's definitely not charging. However, it still could be just a fuse or something gone. So then we need to go about checking the fuses. Yes, I could go through checking every single fuse, but I'll tell you a little cheap way of doing it. Let me take you around to the engine bay. Okay, now I've turned the engine off so you can hear me a bit better. Yes, your alternator down there, and on the back of the alternator you've got a big 50mm cable which goes directly to your starter battery, and that's what charges your starter battery. Now also on the back of your alternator there's a 2-pin plug. Now on that 2-pin plug you should have a trigger wire which should be 12 volt or thereabouts, and what that'll do is that'll switch your alternator on or off, so that because these are smart alternators, it's not really the alternator that's smart, it's the ECU that's controlling the alternator. So when that 12 volt feed stops, the alternator will stop charging. So like when you're on idle and things like that, it'll stop it charging, or when the battery's fully charged it'll stop it charging, and all sorts of things like that. And when you switch the engine off, it'll stop the alternator being live. Now also on that 2-pin plug you've got a data cable, and the data cable is what reads the voltage going in, and all the data from the ECU, from the alternator, that the ECU needs to know. So now you can either get down there and disconnect the plug and check it, or you can follow the wire up the back here, and there's another joining plug there which I've already disconnected. Now really you need to check it at the back of the alternator, but this is what where I've checked it, and I've also checked it at the alternator. So although it looks like a 3-pin, there's only 2 wires going to it. So one will be a an engine live, so only live when the engine's running, and the other one will be a sort of a live, it'll be 5 volt or thereabouts, which is an ECU controlled like data cable, and that's what reads all the information from the ECU. So as long as you've got them 2 lives, your alternator should be working. Now if the batteries were fully charged and you tested them and it was live, it doesn't necessarily mean your alternator's not working. It could also mean that your battery's fully charged and therefore it doesn't need it. So I know when I tested it originally, the batteries were pretty much fully depleted, so the alternator should have been charging. So I've only got battery voltage, and if you're unsure as well, you can just up the RPM, and the battery voltage should increase, which it doesn't on mine. So let's set about testing that now. It is going to be difficult doing it one-handed and with a camera in my hand, but I'll see what I can do for you guys. Okay guys, I hope you can hear me and I hope you can see. Right, this test light here, if it's green it's an earth, and if it's a red it's a 12 volt or battery live, and if it's faint red it means it's a lower voltage. So I just go on that one, and that's a bright red, so we know that that's 12 volt. And this one here is a very faint red, and that would be my 5 volt trigger live. Well, not trigger, but that's a data live for the ECU and so on. Now at this point it shouldn't be charging at all, because that's disconnecting. So I'll just double check on my voltmeter that we're getting still battery voltage. Okay, so we're still getting battery voltage there, around about 12 volts. So if I plug that back in, it'd be nice if that jumped up and it was just a bad connection, but I've had these connections on and off several times now and it hasn't jumped up. So let me get in there. I'm going to be in your way a little bit now. Get in there and reconnect this plug. Right, let's go back and check that battery live. And still exactly the same. And the light has just come on the dash saying charge error. So we've eradicated any possible fuses, we've eradicated the fact that there's a battery issue because we know that's running 12 volt even with the engine running. I've checked the alternator belt and I know that's good and turning. Now there's one other possibility that it could be, and the other possibility that it could be would be that clutch on the front of the alternator. Now if that's just freewheeling and not turning the alternator, then there's a good chance that the alternator's not charging, and it'll just be freewheeling. The alternator would be just barely turning. So I doubt that's the case. I think this is the original alternator, and 136,000 miles, I don't think it's done too bad. So let's get that belt off and see about whether that clutch is okay or not. Now to remove the belt, you can just see the silver of my spanner. That's a sprung loaded tensioner. If you put a 15mm spanner on that and rotate it clockwise, that'll release the tension off the belt and you can just flip it off. You don't have to fully remove the belt. If you're doing just the alternator, you can just flip it off the bottom and then you've only got a couple of more pulleys to put back on. Right, so this is the alternator pulley, and there's a clutch inside this, and if you snatch it, you should feel it sort of slip, and the same the other way, and then you should feel it sort of engage once it sort of you reach the end of your spinning it fast. And the idea of the clutches is to stop the inertia effect, making the belt squeal. So if you've got a bit of a drain on your battery, what it will do is it will make this alternator work harder. And what you don't want to do is be cranking your battery and straight away that's making it squeal, making your belt squeal and stuff like that. So what it does is it creates an inertia slip and progressively kicks your alternator in as this clutch stops slipping. So it's a gradual take up of your alternator. So it stretches the life out of your belts, all sorts of things like that. Now one or two things, if that clutch seizes, you'll probably find you're going through your belts very fast. If the clutch goes and it's just freewheeling, you'll probably find you're getting poor charge out of your alternator and possibly even a rumbling noise, I don't know. But you should only get a little bit of slippage out of that both ways, and I do. And I can feel the alternator turning when I do it slowly. but when I turn it fast I can feel it slip and then take it up again. So I know the clutch is okay, I know the trigger wire is okay, you know, 12 volt trigger and engine run trigger. I know the ECU data cable's okay, and I know the main power out of the alternator to the leisure battery is okay. So that only leaves an alternator fault. So that leaves me now to go and source an alternator. So got my alternator. This is a 180 amp. They even give you a packet of sweets, look, and they give you a bit of information there about it. I'll drop a link into where I got it from, but there's the phone number. You can either message them on eBay if you get any issues, or give them a call, and they're very good. Before they post it out, they ask you for your registration number just to confirm that they're sending out the right one, because although you get the option to put your registration number in on eBay, they like to receive it personally. So this is a 180 amp alternator, and it's an identical match for one that I've got on there, except for its higher amperage output. So it's the same size and dimensions, it's just got a higher output. Let me just get it out of the box for you. So this is the alternator, that's the clutch on the front. Again, you can feel that slip when you snatch it both ways, and you can feel it turning when you turn it slowly. Feel it turning the alternator. Now on the back here, that's where your main 50mm cable goes to your starter battery, and this is the other end of that plug that I was telling you about, and you've got two pins in there. One's your main trigger wire from your engine run signal, and one's a data cable that goes to your ECU. So you're well to check there, you know, on the wire end and on the plug end that I was telling you about, which is a bit easier to get to. You've got two bolt fixings, one there and one there. It's a pretty straightforward fitment, so we'll go about fitting that now. Okay, first thing you want to do is remove your battery, isolate your battery. Now that, like I said, that 50mm cable from your alternator comes straight up here via a big fuse. I can't remember what size fuse it is, but there'll be a fuse in this block here somewhere, probably 200 amp, 250 amps, something like that. So you only need to remove one, because if you remove the battery wire off your alternator and it touches earth, it's going to short out and probably blow that fuse. So just remove your earth terminal from your battery and tuck it down there nice and neatly out the way, and that way then when you disconnect the battery wire from your alternator, it's got no fear of arcing out and doing any damage to any ECUs or spiking anything. So that's that done. Now we know the battery is disconnected. Now I've already removed my air box. Now I'm going to remove this cabin filter box, which is three 10mm. You've got two there and then one down there. So I'll set about now removing that. That's the three bolts undone. Now that should just slip off, and then that comes out the way. That gives you a lot more room to see what you're doing regarding the alternator. And what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to remove this turbo pipe. It's on two hose clips. You got one there. These are worth getting. They're hose clip things, and they're flexible, so you can get round in awkward bends. So undo that one, loosen that off. Then you got another one here, loosen that one off. Give them a bit of a wiggle and a jiggle, and see if I can get my hook tool in there and just run it round. What happens is they create like a bond to it, because it's only rubber to plastic, so it sort of like welds itself to it. So if you run one of the hook tools around it, it will release it. And the same on the other end. Try not to spike and damage the pipe. And there's a wire there. Remove that wire as well. That's like a boost pressure sensor. and then there should be some nuts holding it on as well somewhere. There's a little nut down there if I can get to it. There we go, bolt that holds that on. There's another one down there. I got that other bolt out. That's difficult to get to that one. That's going to be a pain to put back in. Right, so that's loose now. So what I need to do is release it from this rubber of the other one. That's it, it's coming now. Oh, and there's a wire there. Got that unclip. And that's one of your turbo pipes. So while I'm at it, I can clean that out. There's a bit of an oil residue in there, so I can clean that out. That's a little cover that's on the main 50mm terminal, and that'd be a 13mm nut on there. And then you get your 2-pin plug. Undo that. That's your other end of that wire. So that wire there and that wire there are actually joined. So yes, you can test it. Best to test it this end, because then you know you've got no brakes in here. But if you just want a speedy sort of thing at the side of the road, you can reach down and get to that plug far easier than you can that one. So I'll get a 13mm spanner on that live terminal wire and undo that. Because I've isolated the battery, I've got no fear of arcing out. If I didn't disconnect the battery, I'll be conscious of always sort of touching that live wire and then the chassis or some other earth point with my spanner. That's your 13mm. There might be a washer on that, let me just check that. There's no washer on it. I think there should be though. So that's your 50mm, that's your main charger wire. I'll give that a clean up as well, just to make sure that's okay and clean before I refit that. That goes direct to your battery via a large fuse. Next thing now is to actually release the alternator and remove it. One of your 13mm that hold your alternator on is tucked right down in the casting there, just above your tensioner. Now it looks like if you was to drop it, it could go down into the abyss, but I'm pretty sure that's a really long bolt, so you've got no fear of dropping it. So let me see if I can get my spanner or my ratchet in there and undo it. It wasn't as tight as I thought. Yeah, and it's a long bolt, so you've got no fear of dropping it down to the little crevice that's there. If that was a nut and you dropped it, you'd be in a world of pain. So if you're using a short socket down there like that, like I just did, don't drop your socket. But I didn't drop it. Sod's law is I will when I come to put it back together. So now I've got to find where the other 13mm is, and let me just check the other alternator and I'll see roughly how far apart them are, so it gives me a guideline of where I'm looking for. So I'm looking at, I don't know, 4 inches down, which might be tucked right down there in that crevice. I think I see where it's going to be. Let's see if that is the alternator one and not the power steering pump one. That might be the power steering pump one, you know. Might need to get a mirror in there and just see what I'm looking at. Might be doing the wrong one unless it's the same one. Feels like the alternator one. It's the same one, so I assume it's the alternator. Right, so I'll get a little lever bar in there and see if I can just tweak that out. can't find my lever bar, so I'll just use a screwdriver. Yep, it's moving now, but it's solid. So I've got a bigger screwdriver and levered it, and it is just under a bit of corrosion and friction. So I've managed to get it off. There you go. Now, after some investigation, I did notice that some of these only have a single pin and some have a twin pin. So when you're doing one, make sure you get the new alternator that has the right number of pins for your vehicle. My one has got the 2 wires. A lot of them have only got 1 wire. I don't know why that is. Is it really a true smart alternator if it hasn't got the ECU diagnostic control? Is it just a simple on and off alternator? As where this one has got like a BMS built into the ECU, which tells the alternator how much charge and when to put charge in, and I can't see if it's only got single wire it doing that. That's the purpose of the second wire, which is only 5 volt, which is ECU voltage. So anyway, got the alternator out. Now I've just got to confirm that the 2 alternators are matching. Right. Let's see how difficult this is going to be to get it back in. I reckon it's going to be pretty tricky. Ding, 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 ding. It's difficult getting the old one out, so it's going to be difficult getting the new one in. Let's see if I can hook that up there somewhere like that. Yeah, that's alright. Now I've got to line that up and get that in, down in that little crevice. Now a lot of people I've seen doing these, they've already got all the front end stripped out. I'm trying not to. I'm trying not to strip much out. Now in the near future I've got to do a cam belt and water pump and stuff on this. It's done 136,000 miles now, so it's probably getting about due for its second belt, assuming it's had one done in the past. But I've pulled these covers off and had a look, and the belt's in fantastic condition, but that don't mean anything. So I will do that in the next month or so. So let's get these bolts in, stop messing about. I'm going to be in your way a bit here now. Where's that bolt? Let's get that in there like that. What I'm doing is I put the bolt in the alternator, so that when I get it somewhere near, I know that I should be able to just push it through the hole. Just, he says. It's just like that, he says. Mother Hubbard. No, I missed it. Like I said, it's lining the holes up is really difficult. Have I done it? Have I done it? Yep, got one in. And the next one should be a bit easier. Let's get this started. A few threads before I start the other one. I don't want to tighten this one up. Now, I don't like the fact that that's so loose. Now I think the spaces, let me just show you on the old one. These spaces here, I think as you do them up, they pull through, tightening this gap up. That's probably why it's so easy to fit this on, and why this one was so tight getting off. So by rights, as I tighten that bolt up, it should pull that spacer that way. Does that make sense? That sort of slides, and because it's back that way, it's giving me more movement. So if you was to take one of these off and you're putting the same one back on, potentially you could put your bolt back in there, give that a tap with a hammer, and it should shove that back a bit, making it a bit easier to put your old alternator back on if you was doing that. But let's carry on. I'll try and find that hole down in the abyss. I've only done and bloody done it, haven't I? Right, now I've got to tighten them up. Sorry, I'm not really showing you a great deal here. Just that if I let you see, I can't. And if I can see, you can't. So I'm showing you the best I can. Apologies. That out with my big hands. I don't know what's going on with this bolt, but it's like it. Let me just take it out again. I'm not particularly happy with that. It's like it's got rounded off on it or something. But it gripped all right when I took it out. What's going on with this bolt? Let's have a look. Yeah, someone's already give it a clout. Look, like I said, to space that out. So this alternator's been off before. Now there's a couple of things I've noticed where this engine's had some work done on it before, I think. But look, it's got a burr on it. So I'm just gonna see if I can clean that up with a file or a sander or something, just to make my life a bit easier for putting it back together. Hold on a sec. Okay, I don't know if that's picking up, but I've just dressed out the little burrs on that. Now my socket fits. I did struggle getting the socket on there, and I thought it was just me being an idiot when it came to removing the bolt, but it looked like someone would give it a clout. Like I said, more than likely to spread them spacers out. Someone's bashed it, and that's why that top corner there, look, is sloped. Someone's give it a clout, so they didn't clout it square on, they've caught it on the edge. But anyway, let's get that back in and have another go. Oh, that's so much better. Socket fits on now. I can feel that spacer pulling towards me. I can feel it sort of. You can probably even hear it. Can you hear it? Now I'm actually tightening. There we go. Right, so even with one on now, that's done. But I've just got to tighten that bottom one. It's a bit difficult to get to this bottom one. Happy with that tightness. Yeah, feels beautiful. Feels a lot less harsh than that old alternator. Now, do I put the belt on first, or do I put the wires on first? Right, well, let's get that. Where's that end of that plug? Let's get that 2-pin plug on, which a lot of people only have one wire. I will do some investigation as to why some have one and some have two. I've cleaned that wire up as well. This Tiny down there, but this main thing, I'll give it a bit of a clean up with some emery cloth. Just makes sense to do that. Get my bolt back on. Now, I've seen some people over tighten these before and snap them off. But they only really need a little bit of a nip. That's about it. Give it one more. That'll do. Like I said, don't over tighten them, they do snap off, and then you're in for another alternator. So put the plastic isolator cap back on, so if anything touches it, it doesn't arc out. So that's the wires back on. Now I've just got to get the belt back on. Okay, so I've got the belt back on, got the wires on at the back, got all the bolts tightened up. Now it's a case of getting that turbo pipe back on, getting this bracket bolted back on, and go from there. I'm not looking forward to doing this turbo pipe. It was a pain in the backside to get out. I'm going to give the pipe a clean out first. I can't even test it at this point because it's just going to put EML lights on and stuff like that. So I'll get the turbo pipe on first before I give it a test run. Okay, so I've got this pipe in place. Now I've just got to get these two ridiculously difficult nuts in, bolts in, whatever you want to call them. They're going to be difficult. The trouble is the bolt is too loose for the ratchet to work, if you know what I mean. When I turn it back, it wants to turn the bolt back. So I've got to try and tighten it up a bit more with my fingers. That is easier said than done. It's a little bit too tight for my fingers, too loose for the ratchet. Right. So I got them in with a lot of effing and jeffing, hence why I turned the camera off. I was losing my patience, but it is doable. Get them pipes nice and tight. Don't want them coming off, do we? Another one at the back here. Now make sure you get these pipes on all the way. If you can see there's a plastic bump stop in the pipe moulding, so that makes sure you get the pipe on all the way, and then the shoulder is back here. Shoulder's back here, and then make sure you get the clip halfway between that bump stop and that shoulder that you can feel under the pipe, and that way then you know you've got a good grip on the pipe. And the same with this back one. And get it up as tight as you can. See if I can get to this other one and give it a nip up and up. I think the throttle body's in the way. Yeah. Right, that's that tight. That's that wire on. Pipe's all nice and tight. Alternator's tight. Wires are tight. Belt's on. Now I can get the cabin filter box back in. Sort of twist it as you're getting it out. I'm bumping you around, I know, but don't worry about that. You'll be alright. Now there is like a locator on the bottom. Make sure you get that in the hole, and then get your 3 bolts pushed over, and then get your nuts back on. These nuts. Get your air box back in. You've got two slots at the back here that go on your rubber things at the front towards the bulkhead. Then you've got two rubber pegs that go in the front. Give that a push down. Plug your wires back in for your air mass sensor. And your air intake temp sensor. Slide your oil filter thing back in. And your jump start point back in. Put your air intake on. Give that a tighten up. Alright. Oh. And then you got your air intake pipe that goes on there. Push that in there. Push that in there. Job done. We've got it all back together now, so we're good to test it. The actual job of changing the alternator, getting the old one unbolted and back in, ain't too bad. The worst bit of the job is that turbo intake pipe. Don't know why they've overcomplicated that, but anyway, once you get past taking that off, the alternator is quite easy to come off. Once you get past putting that pipe back on, the whole job isn't too bad. So let's get testing it now and see what multimeter readings we get, and hopefully, fingers crossed, that light stays off the damn dash. Let's see. 12.6. So let's now go and start the engine and see what we get then as a reading. Fingers crossed. There we go. Exactly as I predicted. On idle, about 14.5. So that's bang on. If I was to increase that RPM, that would go up slightly. Shouldn't really go much above 15 because then that's overcharging. But no, I'm well happy with that. That's great. Now I'm putting an extra 40 amps of charge power out, so that should keep up with my starter battery and my leisure batteries quite easy. I will just go and flip all my switches back on my starter leisure batteries because I isolated those, and see what charge I'll get off that. So that wraps up our alternator scenario and alternator change. So I'm very happy with the results. Just got to wash up and give it a road test. But all the tests come back okay. If you like what you're seeing, please like, please subscribe, and please give us a comment. And if you really feel like it, click that little bell icon and you get to see all our future videos. And on that note, we'll see you on the next one. See ya, bye.
Hey darling, can I tell you what's been on my mind? Sick and tired of the 9 to 5 in the city light.